The film begins with Paul on a ship returning with a large number of soldiers from the war. At that time, he searches for his wife among the waiting crowd, but he cannot find her. When Paul returns home and greets his wife, he tells her that he was looking for her at the harbor, but she was not there. Betty replies that she did not know he was coming that day. He asks her about the letters he had been sending, and Betty tells him that she kept them all, but she could not bear to read about all the death, pain, and wars he wrote about. As he knows, she does not read very well. Betty says the most important thing is that he returned safely and that she is relieved. She tells him that she contacted his manager at work to make sure he kept his job and that she also spoke to him about a promotion. Here we learn that Paul works selling chocolate, but he tells her he does not want to return to that job again. Betty responds that he must surely have much better plans. However, Paul tells her that he wrote all his dreams and ideas in his letters, and if she had read them, she would have known. But Betty does not pay attention to what he says. She tells him she missed him and does not want to talk about the letters. She says he will go down as usual to continue his work selling chocolate, and Paul agrees. Later, we see Paul traveling by train. He meets a girl by chance and tries to help her place her suitcase, but it falls and they both fall with it. At that moment, he sees a broken photograph. The girl says to him, "He will kill me." Paul replies that it is just broken glass and can be replaced, not understanding what she means. She sits behind him on the train. He falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he finds that she has gotten off, so he gets off as well. After getting off, we see him running after a bus to catch it to Sacramento. When he boards, he finds the same girl from the train. She apologizes for what happened. He sees her holding a book and asks if it is for university. She tells him she is studying for a master's degree and that she loves reading. She is returning home to Napa, where her family owns a vineyard. She then asks about him. He says he has work in Sacramento and explains that the train would have taken him there, but when she fell, she accidentally switched her ticket with his, so he had to get off and board again. She apologizes once more. Then we see two young men board the bus. They begin harassing her, and when Paul intervenes, they fight him and exchange blows. The bus driver throws all three of them off the bus. Afterward, Paul walks for a while and runs into her again as she sits nearby. He tells her they did not properly introduce themselves and says his name is Paul. She replies that she is Victoria. He asks why she got off the bus, and she says it is her stop. Then she begins to cry. When Paul asks what is wrong, she tells him her father will kill her. He thinks it is because of the photograph, but she tells him that is not the reason. He asks her what the reason is, and she tells him she made a mistake with her teacher, who left her after she became pregnant. If she returns home, her father will kill her because he is strict and traditional. She also says that if she comes back without a husband, he will do what he said. Paul is moved and tells her he can pretend to be her husband for one day, then write her a letter saying he left her and went away. At first, she says he has no fault in this, but after thinking, she tells him she has no other solution and agrees. We then see Paul and Victoria walking together. He tells her about his dream of having a house, children, a good job, and owning a dog. He says he wrote all of that to his wife. Victoria replies that his wife surely remembers every word he wrote to her. He says, "Of course." Victoria thanks him for everything he has done and is doing for her and tells him he is a very kind and wonderful person. Paul replies that he is also doing this for the baby. They arrive at her father's vineyard and family home. Victoria tells him they call it Los Nubes, which means the clouds. At that moment, Paul opens his chocolate case and finds that each piece is shaped like a ring. He places one on her finger and puts another on his own to make it look like a wedding ring in front of her family. Suddenly, they hear a gunshot. Paul panics, and her father, who fired the shot, appears. When he asks who Paul is, Victoria says, "This is Paul, my husband." They enter the house, and the father angrily calls the mother, saying this marriage must be annulled. Paul replies that they were married in a church. The whole family gathers and welcomes Victoria and Paul, which makes the father even angrier. He asks Paul about his job, and Paul says he sells chocolate. The father turns to the grandfather and says, "You are the head of the family. Do something." The grandfather approaches and says, "I am Pedro. Welcome to our family." He asks if he may taste the chocolate. Paul agrees and gives him some. Everyone is welcoming except the father. Later, we see that Victoria is upset with her father. Her mother, Mary, tells her she should have at least informed them. Her grandmother says her father has always wanted things to be proper and organized. Victoria reminds her mother that she always told her the heart chooses, and she chose Paul with her heart. Her mother reassures her that everything will be fine. They sit down for dinner, and the family asks how they met. They invent a story about seeing each other. The father asks Paul where he is from. He says he is from Poland. When asked about his family, he says he does not know his parents and grew up in an orphanage. The father becomes angry and says his daughter comes from one of the greatest families in Mexico, while he comes with no past, knowing nothing about his family and having no future. Angrily, he asks Victoria what she knows about him. She replies that she knows his dreams, a house with a garden, children, and a beautiful, peaceful life. Paul looks at her because she remembered his dreams. Then he apologizes and leaves the table. Victoria follows him to apologize, but he tells her that if he were in her father's place and his daughter had done this, he would have reacted the same way. She looks at him admiringly and says, "But you are not like him." Paul then tells her that in 8 hours, he will leave. Later, we see the mother preparing her own bed for them to sleep in, telling them that their ancestors slept in it and wishing them happiness. She says she will send the father to wish them good night, then leaves. In the room, Victoria asks Paul if he likes his job selling chocolate. He says no, but he has to do it. We then see the father coming to wish them good night. While speaking, he notices the blanket on the floor. He says good night and leaves, so Paul is forced to lie beside Victoria in case someone comes back. During the night, while they are sleeping, Paul wakes up from a disturbing nightmare about the war. When Victoria wakes to his voice, she tells him not to be afraid and that he was dreaming. At the same time, they hear a loud ringing sound. When Paul asks about it, Victoria tells him it is the sound of frost. At that time, we see the entire family gathered below the vineyard, and we discover that there is a severe cold wave. They have to light many fires and wear wing-like structures, trying to spread the heat from the flames over the crops so they will not be damaged by the weather. Victoria begins teaching Paul what he must do until the cold wave passes without any loss to the harvest. Later, we see Paul saying goodbye to Victoria and telling her he will leave at sunrise so no one will be awake to ask where he is going. He bids her farewell and walks away. But as he is leaving, the grandfather sees him, takes him along, and they walk together. The grandfather keeps tasting the chocolate Paul carries. Then he shows him the main vine root that he and Pedro once brought, telling him that this is the root of the family and that from today, Paul is also part of that root. He tells him he is not an orphan and that he will stay with them because they are his family, at least until the harvest is complete. However, Paul says he cannot. The grandfather replies that someone else once said the same thing. Paul asks who, and the grandfather answers that Alberto said Paul would not wait and would leave Victoria at the first opportunity. The grandfather says his granddaughter will be the one to pay the price and that Alberto will punish her. He tells Paul that this is the most important day of the year for them. When Paul hears this, he decides to stay until the harvest is gathered. When morning comes, they begin harvesting. Victoria is happy to see that Paul is still there and tells him she is glad he stayed. He replies that what matters most is family and their work. It is clear that she has grown fond of him, and he has grown fond of her as well. At the same time, Pedro, Victoria's brother, arrives. They welcome him, and he meets Paul and greets him warmly. Then we see them all harvesting together, teaching Paul as well. The day is beautiful, they sing and dance and are all happy. Later, we see Paul and Victoria drawing closer to each other without realizing it. But at that very moment, Paul pulls back and tells her that he wants her and wishes he could be close to her, but unfortunately he cannot and does not want to hurt her. Then he leaves her and walks away. After that, we see Pedro and Alberto arguing. When Paul intervenes, the father responds, "What is it to you? You are just a candy seller." A discussion follows, and the father asks him, "Who exactly are you? Where did you come from? What do you do? And why do you sleep on the floor one day and on the couch another?" Victoria replies that if he does not want them there, they will leave. The father says he only wants to know the truth and asks her to tell him, promising he will not do anything. Victoria leaves without answering. Paul tells the father that she will return because she loves her family and wants to stay with them. The father tells him not to interfere and walks away. Later, we see the grandmother preparing Paul's jacket to be washed when a photo of his wife falls out. Paul quickly grabs it. At the same time, he sees Victoria looking exhausted and rushes toward her. But she tells him he was only helping her for one day and now he must return to his life and his wife. Then she leaves. He runs after her, but her father overhears and says he is not convinced of their marriage because there is no proof of their story. Paul responds, asking how he cannot feel his daughter's love and how he can be so harsh. He says he himself has been searching for such love all his life. Victoria overhears him. The father says, "You know nothing about my daughter." Paul replies that he knows she is kind, beautiful, and deserves all the love in the world. The father says, "Do you see all this land and everything around you? I do all this for them." Paul answers that he should tell them that and make them feel it. Then he takes his jacket and leaves. At that moment, the grandfather sees him, takes him to sit down, and talks with him. He makes him drink some wine made from their harvest and says he has a solution. They sit singing and drinking, and the grandfather tells him, "Sing to her." Paul sings beneath her window. The grandfather tells him to keep watching the window. If the light turns on, it means she has forgiven him. At the same time, her father and mother wake up. When the father hears him, he tells his wife that it seems he truly loves her and that he may have judged him unfairly. But Paul does not wait and leaves. At that moment, the light turns on, but he has already decided to go. The next morning, before Paul travels, he attends the harvest festival, where Victoria's family presents their wine. Everyone arrives and sees Paul. The judges taste the wine and like it. Victoria goes to Paul and tells him he sang beautifully, and they drink wine together. Then her father introduces Paul to Father Philip, saying he is a true war hero who helped them with the harvest, and he speaks proudly of him. Father Philip blesses them, and Victoria's father announces before everyone that he will hold his daughter's wedding to Paul that very night and invites all to attend. Paul tells Victoria they must tell everyone the truth. She replies that she will tell them herself. At that moment, Paul gives her his Medal of Bravery as a gift for the baby. Victoria tells him he is the most honorable man she has ever known. She goes to confess the truth to her family, while Paul leaves. When Paul returns home, he finds his wife Betty cheating on him. She apologizes and tells him she never understood him and that her inclinations are different from his. Paul accepts the situation calmly and leaves her, and we see him peaceful and relieved. He then leaves and returns to Victoria. When he arrives, he asks her father to forgive him and apologizes for everything. He says he loves her, that he was trying to help her, that she means everything to him, and that he cannot stay away from her anymore. The father argues with him while Victoria and the rest of the family overhear the conversation. Suddenly, the father drops a kerosene lamp, and fire spreads across the ground. Everyone tries to save the land and the harvest, but unfortunately they fail. Pedro nearly dies, but Paul saves him and extinguishes the fire on him. However, the entire land turns to ashes. The father then says he loves them very much and did not realize he was wrong. At that moment, Paul remembers the main vine root the grandfather gave him earlier. He rushes to pull it from the ground and gives it to the father, telling him it was only burned on the outside. When the father examines it, he discovers it is alive and healthy inside, meaning they can plant the harvest again. Everyone cheers that lost noobs will live again. At the same time, the father cuts a piece of the root and gives it to Paul, telling him it is his root and his family's root, and that God destined this land and this family to be his with honor and love. He asks him to plant it and help it grow. Paul happily replies that he does not know how, and everyone laughs. The father calls Victoria and says, "Teach your husband." Paul places the chocolate ring on her finger, everyone is joyful and happy, and the film ends.